Hi there. In today's video, we are going to talk about something many students wonder about, and that is when we use to and ing together. So, I'm going to explain to you when this happens and how we can use it. Let's look at some examples. This is the most common example of this you will see. I look forward to meeting you. Notice we have our verb, look forward, and then we have this little guy here, to, and then we also have ing. In this case, it's very strange. We are going to learn about why this is in a moment, but before we do that, I want to tell you some of the basic rules so you can understand. First off, what am I talking about with ing, and what am I talking about with to? So let's look at the basic rules. This is all about when you have two verbs in a sentence. For example, thank is the first verb, and help is the second verb. What you will notice is the first rule. Anytime you have a preposition between the first verb and the second, you are going to use ing. A preposition is a word like for, to, about, toward, up, down, in, out. All of these words that tell us where something is located. These are called prepositions. So whenever you see a preposition after a verb, the next verb is going to end in ing. For example, I thank you for helping me. Similarly, we have our verb, interested. I'm interested. So this is the first verb, and then we have a second verb, learn. If we have a preposition after the first verb, like in, I'm interested in, the second verb will end in ing. I'm interested in learning English. We don't say, I'm interested in to learn English. Similarly, we don't say, I thank you to help me. If you have a preposition like for, in, or out, the second verb will always end with ing. If we have two verbs and there's no preposition between them, the second verb will either end in ing or begin with to. So let's look at some examples to understand this better. First, we have the verb enjoy. Here's my first verb. Now think of a second verb we can use. Let's say eat. With the verb enjoy, the verb that follows will always end in ing. For example, I enjoy eating. I enjoy reading. I enjoy listening to music. I enjoy shopping. In this case, the second verb will always end in ing. Here's another example. I started. Let's think of a second verb. How about fish? I started fishing. Again, the first verb is started, and the second verb ends in ing. Other examples include, I started studying. I started eating my dinner. So, in cases like these, the second verb will always take the ing form. Then, we also have some verbs where the second verb does not end in ing. Here's an example. The first verb is decided. The second verb begins with to. I decided to. What's a verb we can use here? Watch. I decided to watch TV. Another example. I want to eat ice cream. In these cases, we have two verbs, and the second verb begins with the word to. What you will notice is that some verbs always follow this pattern, while others always require the ing form. Some verbs can even do both. Unfortunately, this is something you have to memorize, when to use ing and when to use to. But what we are really interested in today is this, the confusing case of when ing and to are used together. So let's look at some more examples of this, and I will explain the rule for when and why this happens. So, I have explained to you the three rules we use when we have two verbs together. Sometimes, you have a verb followed by ing. Sometimes, you have a verb followed by to. And in the case of prepositions, you have a verb followed by ing. I have taught you these three rules. Now we are going to look at a situation where we have both ing and to together. In this case, we have two verbs. The first verb is, I look forward to. The second verb is meeting. So we have two verbs. Here, to is acting as a preposition. Just like we mentioned earlier with prepositions like up, down, in, or out, in this case, to is a preposition. But here's the important part. This is actually a phrasal verb. To is part of the verb look forward. You can't say, I look forward meeting. No. To is an essential part of the verb look forward. Because it's a phrasal verb and to is a preposition, the second verb, meeting, is going to end in ing. Another way to look at this is through the following example. I look forward to ice cream. In this case, we only have one verb. The verb is look forward to, and then we have ice cream. We don't have a second verb. Instead, we have a noun, and this is perfectly fine. Here's a little test you can do. If to can be followed only by a noun, then we know it's actually part of the verb. For example, I look forward to ice cream. This works because to is part of the verb. However, let's look at a different case. I hope to ice cream. This does not work because to in this sentence is separate from hope. To is not part of the verb hope. Instead, you'd need to add a second verb. For example, I hope to eat ice cream. Similarly, I need to eat ice cream. In this case, to is separating two verbs, need and eat. It's a different case because to here is not functioning as a preposition, but as part of the verb construction. So, in summary, to can either be part of the first verb as a preposition or act as a connector between two verbs. Let's look at some more examples to clarify this further. You will get used to living here. In this sentence, we have the phrasal verb get used to, which functions as one chunk, get used to. It's considered a fixed expression. Then we have our second verb, living. Notice we have to and ing together. In this case, to acts as a preposition, which is why it is followed by a verb ending in ing. The meaning of get used to is to become accustomed to something. For example, some of my students have moved to Canada, and at first, the cold winters are very difficult for them. They hate the cold. But over time, they get used to it, and eventually, the cold is no longer a problem. They become accustomed to it. Just like in this example, we can also replace the second verb with a noun. For instance, you will get used to winter. You will get used to English. Or as in the original sentence, we can use a verb. You will get used to living here. Both are possible, which reinforces that get used to is a fixed chunk where to serves as a preposition. We have another example. Judge Judy objects to lying. Here, objects means she gets angry or disapproves of lying. Once again, we see to followed by ing. The verb is objects to, and it functions as one unit, while lying is the second verb. Another example. I resorted to stealing, or I confessed to stealing. If you resort to something, it means you had to do it even if you didn't really want to. For instance, imagine you have a big test and you know you're going to fail, so you decide to cheat. I resorted to cheating. Usually resorting to something refers to doing something undesirable. So, I resorted to stealing. Again, we see to and ing. The reason for this is that resorted and to form a unit. They always go together. You can't say, I resort stealing. It must always be, I resorted to stealing. The same applies to the word confess. If you confess to something, it means you admit to doing something wrong. For example, I confessed to stealing. Once again, just like resorted to, confessed to forms a single unit. These words always go together. In this case, to is a preposition, and because of that, the verb that follows will always end in ing. Our final example. I'm opposed to living in Antarctica. This means, I'm against living in Antarctica. The phrase I'm opposed to is another unit. It goes together as a phrasal verb. Because to is a preposition here, the verb that follows must end in ing. So, I'm opposed to living in Antarctica. I'm opposed to drinking and driving. I'm opposed to doing drugs. You can even replace the verb with a noun. I'm opposed to drugs. I'm opposed to doing drugs. The key takeaway here is that sometimes we have to and ing together after a verb. This happens when to is part of a phrasal verb and acts as a preposition. And that's it for today's lesson. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more lessons like this, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any future updates. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.